Chase McGrath for the win for the Volunteers. From 40. On the way, a knuckleball. He got it! And here they come.
What's up, y'all? Welcome on into the GoVols247 Podcast. Wes Rucker coming to you from Fort Rucker Studio here on a pleasant Monday afternoon in God's own Knoxville, Tennessee. How are you? I hope you're well. I hope everything in your life is good. If you're a Tennessee football fan, I assume you had a good weekend. The Vols put up 71 points in a 71-0 burger win over Kent State. Probably the worst team I've ever seen play at Neyland Stadium. It was a rough one for them. In some ways, not sure exactly what Tennessee got out of that, other than, some freshmen got to play, some walk-ons did some stuff. I guess confidence would stay up. There's not a lot you can learn from something like that. But nonetheless, it was a fun night for everybody involved, except for Kent State. I imagine Kenny Burns and his squad had a rough one, but the Vols have moved on. They will play what I would imagine for the first time this season, possibly a 60-minute football game. Against Oklahoma on Saturday. The 6th-ranked Vols playing the 15th-ranked Sooners, I believe 15th-ranked Sooners down there at Memorial Stadium in Norman. Homecoming game for Josh Heupel that he actually talked about a little bit Monday. Shocker of the century there. He came out and was he said some stuff. It was nice. I kind of thought he might business as usual, yada yada. No, he came out and said some good stuff. So lots to discuss on this edition of the podcast. To do that, I'm going to go over to Ben McKee's home studio and to an undisclosed location to get Patrick Brown. Fellas, after some technical difficulties, how are we doing today?
Doing well. Fired up. Nothing beats, or it's hard to beat, the feeling of a big football game week, and that's what we have on our hands this week. Tennessee, NC State was fun, but this is going to get turned up a notch. Quick, fast, and in a hurry. Going to be a fun environment on Saturday night. Big-time matchup to discuss from an X's and O's standpoint, and a lot of storylines thrown on top of the madness of the matchup as well. So, again, hard to beat the anticipation and the feeling around town when there's a big football game going on during the upcoming weekend, and fired up to talk about it and write about it all week long.
Yeah, Ben, it feels like we've been talking about this game for a long time. I mean, the storyline of Josh Heupel going back to Oklahoma has been talked about, discussed, gone away, forgotten about, then come back. He's been asked about it several times over the past several months of the offseason, and it's finally here, and it's going to be a big deal.
Is there anything – I imagine we're going to be talking a tremendous amount about the Oklahoma matchup on this podcast. Is there anything – I know after that game on Saturday, the Kent State game, it was just me and it was just Ryan, and we talked about some stuff. And is there anything that y'all just found interesting in that game? Anything that you learned? I mean, we learned Mike Matthews is fun. That's one thing, I guess. But anything you can really take away from a debacle of that degree?
I wanted to defer to Ben because I know he loves SEC MAC showdowns.
I'm deferring to Patrick because I learned absolutely nothing. I find myself very conflicted with those type of football games because I recognize the importance of those football games for teams like Kent State and receiving that paycheck, and earlier this season with Chattanooga. But from an entertainment value, it's just a huge swing and a miss. I mean, Neyland Stadium was still rocking and looked great at the beginning of the football game. Honestly, that's probably my biggest takeaway, just the overall health of the football program. When you look up and it is Kent State, you know that Tennessee is going to win in the manner that it did, and it was still sold out. There were still a ton of butts in seats at kickoff. Neyland Stadium was ready to go at kickoff against that level of competition, and I think that speaks to the overall health of the program and the excitement, obviously. So that was probably my biggest takeaway. I mean, there were some other individual ones, but I just don't think that you can really I just think you have to take it with a grain of salt because Kent State is just a really, really poor football team. It was really fun to see Mike Matthews out there. I enjoyed watching Deshaun Bishop run around as well. Gaston Moore looked good. Had some monies that were had some throws that were on the money. So there were certainly a couple of individual performances that stood out. But I'll be honest, and I know that this is an unpopular opinion amongst college football fans. I am a football fan overall, and so I would like to see more of the NFL model to where we are seeing more competitive football games each and every week. And I say that again with the recognition that the smaller schools need the paycheck. I wish that we could find a delicate balance because there's just too many games. And it's not just Tennessee. We've seen 2 already with Tennessee. But the Ole Miss scores this season, I mean, we could go on and on and on. Auburn whooping up on Alabama A&M and then turning around and losing to Cal. I mean, I think that's a perfect example of maybe we needing, from an entertainment value in college football, needing to go away from the FCS, Kent State type of games because it's not legitimate competition. And to me, that's the reason we're trying to show up on Saturdays, and we're just not doing that every single Saturday.
Well, I think you're just disrespecting the MAC. I mean, Northern Illinois won at Notre Dame. Did you see what Toledo did to Mississippi State? So Kent State was playing for the MAC title 2 seasons ago. It was 17-point game they played against Georgia. That was probably when this game was scheduled, was around that time. And that league is very topsy-turvy where teams can be good contending one year and then bottom out and be
that's what I was going to say.
Year.
That's the weird thing about scheduling that team.
But yeah, I mean, that team is just the fact. 5 bad shotgun snaps. You can't even snap the football. That's like the most basic play. And so I do think there were some takeaways. I think the biggest takeaway is that Tennessee, and I'm sure we'll talk about this too. Tennessee should be a very fresh football team, given that I don't think any defensive starter played more than 17 snaps. Some of those offensive linemen that were hobbled at the NC State game, which was a physical game. They didn't play Lance Hurd, and some of those guys were, and Nico too, they were out midway through the second quarter. So then it was good to see Mike Matthews and Ben, you mentioned Deshaun Bishop. I think he's made a claim to being the top complimentary back to Dylan Sampson. We'll see. I think they probably held Cam Seldon out. I think he maybe could have gone if it had been a bigger game, but held him out an extra week. And so, but Bishop's played really well, and I wonder if he's going to be the next back into the game on Saturday night. And two, we can't overlook that Tennessee played so many young guys in this game: offensive line, defensive line. A lot of guys got some valuable experience, and Josh Heupel talked about that a little bit on Monday, where it's practice matters and you get better there, but you also can take what it's really like in a game and build off that, and players now have film that they can go back and refer to as, okay, here's what I need to do to get better, and that can be beneficial to a lot of the guys that are developing behind the scenes, because I mean there's 80-something guys on scholarship. Not all of them are going to be on the plane to Oklahoma, so some of those guys are going to be behind the scenes trying to get better, maybe working towards next season, and for them to get some snaps. And even in a game like that is good for the health of your program.
Yeah, Wes, I will quickly say that in a true takeaway, I think the elite teams, they win in the manner that Tennessee has won this year against Chattanooga, against Kent State. They don't play down to the level of competition. To Patrick's point about some of the upsets that we have seen, those are average football teams in hindsight. The elite teams do not play down to competition. So, the win, you kind of got to take it with a grain of salt. But on the other hand, I do think it speaks to the overall ability of the team, because if it were a lesser team, if Tennessee wasn't as good as we think that they are, then the scores would not be what they have been. I do think it is a credit to Tennessee that it is an elite team, because the best teams, they handle their business regardless of who they are playing against.
Yeah, I think what I will say in fairness to Tennessee vis-a-vis the schedule is that the MAC, as Pat mentioned earlier, is a very topsy-turvy league. And so what happens is you will commonly see teams go 2-6 in that league and then turn around and be 6-2 the next season. And you schedule these things so far in advance then I know Kent State hasn't had as many great seasons in the MAC as some other programs like Northern Illinois, Bowling Green, others have had at times, obviously. But you look at it and you schedule so far in advance that you don't know what you're going to get by the time that MAC team gets to you. They could be cycled up and they could have a really good team that gives you a sweat, or they could be what we saw from Kent State on Saturday. There's just no way to really know that at the time you schedule it. So the way the schedule was set up for Tennessee, I loved it in that you open with the FCS team and you expect to kind of get some guys in the game, do some stuff, get some experience, knock off some rust. Then the next week you go see what you have against NC State. And then before you go to Oklahoma, you play, a MAC team, which if you get the right MAC team, that's a better challenge than an FCS game, obviously a much better one, but it still gives you the chance to get some stuff right before you go to Oklahoma. And so the way the thing was set up, I thought was fine. It's just, you can't bank on Sean Lewis leaving Kent State and going to Colorado, a bunch of players leaving in the portal. And then Kenny Burns comes in and has a horrible roster to deal with, and he's trying to rebuild the thing. So it's not really Tennessee's fault that the way that went the way that it did. But my question is this, kind of turning the page toward Oklahoma, I have some concerns that Tennessee has not played a full football game yet. And I imagine that during the course of the week, they are getting in their work, they are getting in their conditioning, and they feel pretty good about the levels they're at. Because you think about teams that go into the season and play bangers right out of the gate, right? We've seen these games where it's a 60-minute brawl right out of the gate in the first one. And those teams are usually ready to go because they've prepared in camp and all that. Tennessee, Nico Iamaleava has played, he played a half against Chattanooga, 3/4 against NC State, in 25 minutes against Kent State. I have concerns that some of these guys on the defense, they're going to rotate guys a lot during the season. I'm not too concerned about that. Offensively, you're going to play these O-linemen, the five main guys, or at least six of them, are going to get almost all the snaps during a regular game. They've not done that. Nico Iamaleava is going to have to stay mentally, physically locked in for 4 quarters. He hadn't done that. Sampson hadn't done that. The receivers haven't done that. I have concerns going on the road. I looked at the forecast. I think the high is going to be like 96 that day in Norman, and then it's going to be probably around 90 or so around kickoff, something like that, and then maybe go down a little bit. It's going to be hot. It's going to be humid. I have concerns about that. And I asked Heupel about that today, and he said they think they're doing stuff during the week to handle it. But that's an issue for me because Oklahoma has not been nearly as good as Tennessee this season, but Oklahoma's had to play some 60-minute battles. So those guys physically at least are prepared for that. I don't know if Tennessee is.
Well, I don't see it as much of a concern as you do, Wes. I think that it's, Tennessee's going to be fresh. I mean, those guys should have full tanks at this point of the season. And Oklahoma's been, as you mentioned, in battle. So that, those guys haven't gotten as much recovery time and things like that. And so the bigger question is how does Tennessee handle adversity? And that's maybe where the mental side of what you're saying is does to me. I would agree with that because we haven't really seen Tennessee have to face any adversity. I mean, the first game of the season, it was 24-0 in the first quarter. Saturday, it was 37-0. There's really not anything that's gone a whole lot wrong for Tennessee at this point. So, they had a little bit of a wobble there in the first half against NC State where, Nico threw a pick and they were able to recover and hold that to a field goal. NC State had a good drive going. They were able to swing that back and make the play with Will Brooks. But when you go into someone else's stadium and you have everybody against you, it inevitably things are going to go wrong, and it feels like it's compounded because it's loud and at this stadium in particular, the fans are right on top of you. That sideline's pretty close to the stands there in Norman. So that we still have to see how this team sort of handles it when things go wrong. And in the past, we've seen Tennessee almost kind of crumble a little bit on the road when things haven't gone their way. So you think back to, I think Heupel's 20-4 at Neyland. His record away from Neyland's not as good, and
the offense isn't nearly as prolific.
And you take out Vanderbilt, Kentucky, and maybe 3 or 4 road wins, and you go back to Pitt. That was a survive kind of game. They didn't play very well that day, but found a way to win. LSU was the dominant performance, but
Mizzou also.
Their first season.
Yeah, Mizzou.
Well, I mean,
was a good road performance.
I wouldn't call that a hostile road environment though. And there were people that will say that LSU was 11 a.m. kickoff, what have you.
I am one.
So you're saying LSU? That was it was also a muted atmosphere because LSU botched the opening kickoff and Tennessee scored right away, and that's the key.
Was still you don't take anything away from that win. It was still impressive, but you did not get vintage Death Valley.
But I think back to Georgia in 22. I think back to when they've gone to Alabama. Obviously, they've had some wonky stuff. We'll put it that way. Happen in that stadium, as does happen to a lot of SEC teams when you go to Tuscaloosa. But Florida last season, they've obviously they have a long history across multiple coaching regimes and teams of going down there and peeing down the leg. So this is a new team, though. They have different leadership. There are a lot of guys that have been through some of those battles in other team stadiums. So that's my bigger question, Wes, and is that can Tennessee mentally handle the environment that they're going to face? And I would imagine it's going to be a pretty, to use the kids' term, lit environment in Norman, given that they've got all day to build up to it. It's their first SEC game. They've obviously been excited about this move for going on 3 years now.
Game days in town.
Game days there. So Josh Pate will be there.
More importantly than game day, Josh Pate will be there.
True. So Ben, I mean, do you think physically it's an issue like Wes thinks that, James Pierce has played like 50 snaps all season, or
in two of the 3 games he played 10 and 14 snaps. Do
you think he and some of these other guys are ready to go out there, and if they have to play 75, 80 snaps, do you think they're ready to do it physically?
I think they are ready. To me, it's more of just a thought than a concern. I think it's a very fair thought and something to wonder about because that is a thing in sports, to where you see teams. Now, I think you see it more towards the end of seasons, like a team that has a strong record, but they haven't necessarily been tested throughout the year, and then it kind of gets late in the season and they finally get tested and they don't respond well to it. I just don't think this is a very similar situation. I think if Tennessee struggles somewhere in that regard, I think it's maybe more of the inexperience of a Nico Iamaleava making his first career SEC start on the road, or just simply making his 5th career start overall. There's some youth at some positions, most notably that one. So it would be more something along those lines. So I think it's very, very, very fair thought that Wes brings up because Tennessee has not been tested really at all yet. And this, we assume, is going to be a much closer football game throughout the game. Tennessee has not not played in the type of heat that they are going to play in this weekend. That is something that I think Oklahoma has an advantage in. That, to me, that's more of a concern than Tennessee not being really, I shouldn't say push, but not having to have played a full 60 minutes like your first team offense, first team defense, not having to have played a legitimate, extensive game. To me, the just simply playing in the heat is more of a concern than that. So it's a very fair thought, I believe, but to me, that's all that it is right now. It's a thought rather than a concern, because we wondered how this team was going to be ready physically for week 1, week 2, after having a light preseason fall camp, and that proved to be just simply conversation, because they have showed no signs of feeling, or being in a bad spot because they took it lightly in fall camp. They've been clicking on all cylinders through the first 3 games, despite having a light fall camp. So they've proven to be right in terms of how they handled fall camp is what I'm getting at. I have a great deal of confidence in Kurt Schmidt and the Tennessee strength staff. I would be very surprised if they do not hold up physically and mentally throughout a 60-minute football game this Saturday. But they do need to go prove it, which is why I think it is a fair thought to have, a fair question to pose. But to me, that's all it is right now. It's a thought, it's a question, not a concern.
Yeah, once you get north of Texas, pretty much, the middle part of the country above Texas, like up to the Dakotas, I don't know that fall and spring really exist there to the extent that we know them. There's basically two seasons. There's balls hot and balls cold. That's basically, and right now it's in the balls hot portion of it. So yeah, it's warm, and they're going to have to deal with that. But the last thing for me anyway, before we go to break, is I thought it was interesting. I forget who asked the question to Heupel today. It may have been our good friend Eric Kane. I don't know who. It may have been him, maybe somebody else who asked him about, they asked Miles Kitselman a question, and the preface of it was that Nico has said before he enjoys, gets the most excited about road games. And my question there is, how would he know that? Because he's played in neutral site games, obviously, but he's never started a true road game. And to the best of my knowledge, he's never gone into a true road game when the matter was in doubt. So Miles Kitselman, and this is exactly how you answer the question. No matter how you feel, you answer it the way he answered it, by saying, look, as talented as Nico is, the way his mindset is every day, I haven't even thought about that. I think he's going to be fine. And, maybe he will be, but we don't know that. I mean, this is a big moment for him. Your first true road game is on the road against a team that maybe is not the 15th best team in the country, but is certainly a solid football team and a tough place to play at night.
Well, Nico, I mean, he was with the team last season when they went to Florida and Alabama and those places. And I mean, shoot, even in high school,
I was there too, but I didn't play in them.
You get on the bus and you drive, and it's just a different routine. And some players thrive on the us against everybody mentality. And he did say, to reference the question you brought up, he said, this is his quote from preseason media today. I definitely love road games more than home games. I don't want to upset our Neyland fans. I love playing in Neyland Stadium, but I feel like away games, I just feel like all the odds are against you. It gives you a little bit more of that feeling you get. You could say focus. I think there's plenty of other words that you could use, but going on the road is something I've always loved to do since a young age. So it's almost not necessarily like maybe playing in a loud stadium. It's just the mentality, I think, that he's probably talking about. And that's something that, and we've heard, all three of us have covered this sport and talked to players enough to know that a lot of players will be like, yeah, we like kind of going into someone else's place and trying to, hush their crowd. I mean, that's just kind of, as a competitor.
AC Clausen was legendarily good.
Right. And he had a great road record, right? I mean, I think he only lost one game against Auburn that he almost led like a fourth quarter comeback in. So, yeah, I mean, that's just how some competitors are. They're just kind of wired that way to, they obviously like, when everybody's behind them, but there's almost like a flip that's, a switch that flips, if I could get my phrasing right, that when you go to someone else's place, you want to make a statement about yourself and your team.
Go ahead, Ben.
I would be surprised if Nico does not handle the atmosphere, the environment well this weekend. But it again is a very fair thought, very fair concern, because he hasn't done it yet. And we've all thought a lot of things about a lot of different players, and we're convinced that this was going to happen, that was going to happen, and it didn't play out that way. So, Nico has very much a Cali vibe to him. He is laid back. He's as cool as the other side of the pillow. He doesn't seem to get rattled in these type of moments, but he hasn't been thrown in to this type of moment to this extreme. He of course, again, he said it, he's played in road games since a young age, but it's going to be amplified even more this week. He is going to be playing with as much pressure on him as he has ever played with in his life this weekend. So I would be stunned if he did not handle it well, but he still has to go prove that he will handle it well. And again, I think I said this on a podcast with our friends at More Important Issues during fall camp. Like I would be surprised if he didn't handle it. And I think he's Casey Clausen 2.0 in that regard. And I don't think it's a coincidence that they are from the same neck of the woods in both Cali guys. Like I think that their personality of where they come from is going to help. Obviously, it helped Casey, we know, but I think it will prove to help Nico as well. So to me, like that's a big question mark. I think we are going to learn. We said this about NC State, but to me, like the season truly begins this Saturday for a lot of guys. Like James Pierce's senior or James Pierce Jr.'s season. Ooh, that's a mouthful for me.
Are you talking James or Steven, just to be sure here?
Well, you refer to him as Steven. I refer to him as James and just try to make him a senior, not a junior. But like James, his season starts this weekend. There's been a lot of chit-chat and this and that about his first 3 games and the stats not looking like they're supposed to or what we thought they would look like. His season starts this weekend. Everybody's season truly starts this weekend. And I know we said it a little bit about NC State, but we're really going to learn a lot about Tennessee at Oklahoma and Tennessee at Arkansas. These next 2 games are going to tell us a lot about this football team. And the point that I'm getting to, it's going to tell us a lot about Nico as well. I think that he will handle the environments exceptionally well just because of his personality, and he is laid back. And I like what Miles Kitzelman said. I asked Miles about how he thinks Nico will handle this type of environment, and he says that he's not worried about Nico whatsoever because of all the work that Nico puts in over the course of the week as well. He is very well prepared. So again, I think he's going to excel and thrive in this type of situation. But my overall point is like he still got to go prove it. And we're going to learn a lot about not only this football team, but Nico, especially against Oklahoma, against Arkansas in these 2 road games. And right now, honestly, it's probably the question I have most about this football team is Nico who we think he is? Because these next 2 weeks, I think, is going to show it.
And I'd add to that, too. I think it's just big picture. Ben, I think it's the next step for this program. I mean, if you're going to be a legit championship contender, you're going to have to be able to win in someone else's place. When your back's against the wall, it's loud, they've got the momentum, you've got to go make a play. They've not necessarily been able to do that in some of these road games. And I know I kind of scoffed at Missouri that went 3 years ago, but they went there last season. That was a top 15 game. That was a game that had a lot riding on it in terms of postseason. And even though it wasn't a 12-team playoff, but Tennessee went and played poorly.
That was a thunder turd, is what that was.
Yeah, and so I mean, if they had Alabama on the ropes at 27, you got to have that killer instinct to put that team away. You can't fold like they did against Florida. Although I'd almost put that one to there's some sort of curse or voodoo or something down there.
Agreed.
In the swamp that they can't figure out. But I think they sort of got introduced to it maybe 2 years ago against Georgia when they went there as the number 1 team, and that pissed Georgia off, and that fan base brought it and that team brought it, and Tennessee got stage fried and played poorly. That was a great team, but that was that was their worst game by a wide margin that day. And even in particularly in this day and age, you might have to go win a road playoff game in the first round too. And so if you're going to compete to try to win the SEC and win a national title, you've got to go and be able to handle these kinds of environments. And however the game goes, whether you come out and shut the crowd down early and dominate, or whether it's a 4-quarter battle and you've got to make a play at the end and overcome some adversity throughout. And however it goes, you've got to find a way to win and handle the opponent you're playing, and also all the other external factors that certainly have an impact on a game. And so it's a big opportunity, as Heupel said on Monday, for kind of put the brand out there. And I think as a program, Heupel's done so much for Tennessee, and they came so far so fast. Now they're trying to get over those last couple little hurdles, and I don't say little. Some of them are the hardest to get, because that's the difference between being pretty good and being a legitimate championship caliber team.
I agree. And I'm glad that you mentioned that Georgia game a couple years ago, because put a pin in that. I want to continue that discussion in that way, because there's something about this game a little bit that reminds me about that one. Not that the teams are the same, but there's something about that that's interesting. But before we do that, let's step away, pay some bills, listen to some products, services, in-house ads, and come right back here on the GoVols247 Podcast. #ad. Welcome back to the GoVols247 Podcast, brought to you by whatever products, services, and in-house ads you just heard a moment ago during that commercial break. Wes Rucker and Ben McKee and Patrick Brown here on this fine Monday in God's own Knoxville, Tennessee, talking Tennessee football. A big week for the 6th-ranked Vols, heading to Norman, Oklahoma, to Toby Keith country to play the Oklahoma Sooners, the 15th-ranked Oklahoma Sooners. It'd be interesting to be in that stadium when they do their Toby Keith third quarter, fourth quarter song. I don't even know which song it is, but I imagine it's something about trucks and America, and they don't, or like, something about dirt roads, and
it might be the new Luke Combs one about Oklahoma and storm chasing. That was in the Twisters movie.
There you go. It could be something like that. I imagine it will be something of that note. And people are like, oh, people are on the car. Oh no, it's exactly this song. I don't know. We'll see what it's. I don't know it, to be honest. So we'll hear.
It should be Mo Bamba. I know that.
Yeah, there you go. It should just be Mo Bamba. That would. Well, if you don't want to, if you're Tennessee, you don't want it to be Mo Bamba on the road. Mo Bamba on the road, bad. Mo Bamba at home, good. That's sort of the way that goes from that old Ruck West jam, as I believe his name is. So yeah, there's a lot to discuss about this game. Going to get right back to that after a quick reminder from our end, a quick request from our end to please go rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast wherever you can cast a fine pod. You can find this podcast. We're also transitioning it to video. We were on the last one. We were successfully able to get on the Facebook page. This one, we hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll be able to get it on the YouTube page. Fingers crossed, where we're still working on that, but hopefully it will be there. And hit that like button, the subscribe button to the channel if you haven't done that yet. Regardless, you should go subscribe to the GoVols247 YouTube page, just because there's a ton of stuff on there. Ben does a great job compiling a lot of stuff there for us, and hopefully I can do the one freaking thing I'm supposed to do, which is somehow find a way to get it on YouTube. But if not, the podcast, so if I can't, we can try to find a way to get it to Ben, and then he can. Regardless, please, we do this for free. As long as we have a say in it, we'll keep doing it for free. Can't promise anything, but that's what we want to do. But what helps us keep doing it for free is if y'all rate, review, subscribe, and really hit fresh reviews. That really helps us out. That helps with algorithms. That helps with everything a lot. And please just tell Tennessee fans in your life that you know, or that you want to know about this podcast. I love hearing random ways that people have heard about this podcast. If you're already doing all that stuff, thank you. We love you. If not,
I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Back to it, guys. I had an interesting thought today that sort of jived with something Pat said earlier about the Georgia game a couple years ago. This Oklahoma team, probably not that Georgia team. I think even if the Sooners get better and better throughout the year, I think we can safely say that it won't be quite as good as that Georgia team was a couple of years ago. But I remember that week how angry Georgia was that Tennessee was ranked number 1 in the college football playoff rankings and Georgia wasn't. That irritated them. They didn't think Tennessee belonged in that same conversation as them. And by God, they went out and proved it on Saturday that Tennessee was not ready for that yet. Now in this game, Oklahoma is a 7 to 7.5 point underdog at home. This is the largest that Oklahoma has been a home underdog in Norman since 1998. 1998 was the last time Oklahoma was this much of an underdog at home. And I think there was another wild stat about just how long it's been. Another one went back even further than that. If I can go back and pull that right now, they're basically, yes, a ranked Oklahoma team hasn't been a home favorite of more than 4 points since at least 1978. It's been at least 1978 since a team was favored by this much in Norman. This is, I don't want to say unprecedented, but for this generation, unprecedented. And if you're a program like Oklahoma and you've won the way that they've won for a lot of their history, and you have the pedigree they have, boy, that's got to piss you off, doesn't it?
Well, I think it's just a reflection of what we've seen from these two teams through 3 weeks. I think going back to the offseason, Tennessee was like a 5-ish point underdog, if I had to guess.
That's a big change. That's a big change.
Well, Oklahoma's struggled against Houston and Tulane, and Tennessee's been wiping the floor with the teams that it's played. Early on was Tennessee as a 5-point underdog. So that's a pretty big swing, but I mean, Tennessee has steadily climbed up the polls just based on how they played, how they've looked. Now, again, Kent State, NC State, Chattanooga, not exactly murderer's row, but neither is Temple, Houston, and Tulane. So, and the Green Wave had the ball, had 2 possessions in the fourth quarter, down 5. So that game was up in doubt. Houston had the football down 4 with a chance to go win a couple times late in that game. So Oklahoma's just not looked good. That's why the line has swung that way. I imagine if you're the Sooners, you're probably trying to work on your own issues and trying to, prepare for what you're going to get from Tennessee. Maybe the more that you're then you're focused on the external stuff. And this Oklahoma program and that Georgia program are in 2 different spots. That Georgia team was coming off a national championship. And they had just a different mindset, and Oklahoma's coming into a new league. I'm sure they want to prove that probably more than anything that's related to the line, is they want to say, we can move to the SEC. It's no big deal. We can handle this. That's probably a bigger motivation than, feeling some type of way about the lines. But we'll have to see again. I think that's, I think the crowd will probably be more fired up for, say, hey, this is our intro to the SEC more than, oh, we're an underdog. Oklahoma's not been an underdog. You're right about that, Wes. That's a program that's
put the 2 things together.
Done a lot.
Put the 2 things together there. If this is basically, remember when Mizzou came into the league and people said Mizzou had no business being in the SEC. It wasn't very good. And
that's what I'm saying.
There?
Yeah.
And then it won the East a couple times early on, even though the East was down. They were like, hey, no, we belong here. And if you're in Oklahoma, if you're Oklahoma with the pedigree of that fan base, that program, that team, I mean, that's the easiest team talk ever for Brent Venables all week long. Hey, this is what they think of you in the SEC. They don't respect you at all.
Well, people might have been saying that before they were a 7-point favorite to Tennessee, though, or 7-point underdog Tennessee. That's just sort of, what it's like going into a new league. But, and that's what I was saying, is that, there's probably more motivation and determination from those inside the program and those outside of that program to prove something on that front than anything else regarding being underdog. But Oklahoma probably, there's probably people over there that would say they like being the underdog, because a lot of times they're the favorite, and sometimes when Oklahoma's been the favorite lately, they found a way to stub their toe. Like last season, they were a favorite against Kansas, lost. Favorite against Oklahoma State, lost that game. I mean, they'd beaten Texas. They had all out in front of them in terms of going to the playoff, winning that league, and then sort of faltered. So maybe they like being the underdog. I don't know. I think they, like you said, and as you echoed what I was saying, but Wes, it's the prove it, that you can hold it in the SEC. That would be the bigger motivation to me, Ben. What if you agree? Do you think that's going to be why? I mean, that's why I think it's going to be a pretty loud, hostile environment for Tennessee Saturday night is for that reason alone. It's Oklahoma's first SEC game. It's a chance to come into a new league and say, hey, look, we belong here.
Yeah, I completely agree. And first, I'll say that this season, Oklahoma is playing courtesy of the red, white, and blue by Toby Keith going into the fourth quarter.
That's an interesting choice, because isn't that song about like telling terrorists to F off or something? Are they calling Tennessee? Or
do we not want to tell the terrorists to F off?
No, but are you calling the opposing team a terrorist? I mean, I don't know if I understand that.
I was going to inform you that they are playing it before every fourth quarter this season to honor Toby Keith, because he passed away.
Yes.
Over the offseason. So that is why they are playing it, to honor him. And it's the red, white, and blue. We all love the red, white, and blue. And we will see which team in the fourth quarter puts a boot in the other one's rear end, because it's the American way. But yes, Patrick, I do completely agree with you. To me, the whole betting line, like if you're an Oklahoma player and you need that as motivation, then I think you need to get your priorities situated. I just don't understand how that would be a motivating factor in how you've played the first 3 games, which has led to Tennessee being a touchdown favorite, why that would not be more of the motivation. And I think, Patrick, you're hitting the nail on the head here with what Oklahoma's motivation should be is all the talk this offseason and the last couple of years, not just this offseason. They honestly, as long as the SEC has been what SEC football is, they've heard it that oh, you're not in the SEC. You couldn't cut it in the SEC if you played our schedule. They've heard that every single year as long as they can remember. And
they were given a tough schedule too their first year in the league, by the way.
Yes, to proof a point probably. But yeah, I think that's the motivation. Oh, you're not an SEC football player. You're not going to cut it in the SEC. The SEC is too physical for you. That's to me, that's the motivation.
That's been a line from them. I remember how they celebrated the win here in 2015. I mean, they
beat Alabama in a bowl game, in the Sugar Bowl, I think it was too, where they used that as a big talking point. And that Alabama team maybe wasn't that fired up about it, but still, I mean, they got their tails kicked that game.
There were some other playoff games where Oklahoma got in, and then I think Alabama pushed them around one year. I know Joe Burrow is still throwing touchdowns on them.
That was a rough one
from 2019. But yeah, I was actually just scrolling through Twitter, and there was that clip of I think it was Eric Stryker was I wouldn't pull it up around anyone that doesn't like profanity, but just celebrating that double overtime win in Neyland, talking about the SEC and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, that's probably been a chip on the shoulder of that fan base and that program for a long time.
Yeah, but I mean, if you were looking at this game in terms of where should the line be, should it be this, there's a lot to say about the way Oklahoma has played this season. Like, that's a valid point. I don't think any of us were necessarily expecting that team to definitely be a title contender or anything, but there was a lot of excitement about Jackson Arnold. They send him to media day as a guy who's never really, played much at this point in his college career. And they're like, here, go do that. So yeah, I mean, that was interesting. But I like that defensive line. I still think Oklahoma's got a pretty good defensive line. They got some guys up there that give you a hard time. They always seem to develop that position pretty well. There's some players there, and they've had some injuries too. To some guys that have been out that might be back this week. We'll see. They have been underwhelming, and there is fair concern there. I mean, if you were to take the name Oklahoma off of that uniform and just have it say whatever, Random State University, and you had that team and you watched its first 3 games this season, you would say, even on the road, Tennessee should beat this team. Like, based on what we think we've seen, and then based on that. But, excuse me, since it is Oklahoma, since it is that name, since it is that stadium, which again isn't the toughest place to play in the country, but it's a tough place to play without question. And so that's what makes it interesting to me, is we don't know. You can only play who's in front of you. And Tennessee has not played a tough schedule. Oklahoma's has been tougher. How much tougher? I don't know. Houston's pretty bad right now. Tulane still solid, even though it's lost a bunch of players, and Brazil and others to the portal. That still some good players there. I understand that, but
what about Temple?
Temple tough. TUFF tough. Yeah. Lost Jalen McMurray. I guess maybe could ask some of his teammates, and so could Brazil, right? They could be like, hey, what have y'all seen the past couple weeks? Tell me some stuff. Give me some signals. What's going on here? You know how that works. They could Michigan. They could they could Michigan Stein Steel there. But there you go. There's the name, Connor Stallions. So yeah, I have some doubts about Oklahoma, and I have some things about Tennessee in my mind that I'm like, I think Tennessee looks pretty good, but we don't know. We don't know, do we? I mean, we don't know yet.
Oklahoma feels very NC State-ish to me right now. It honestly does. To your point, Wes, about if you take Oklahoma off the jersey, why would they not be NC State? NC State has sputtered with Western Carolina.
Better on the line of scrimmage.
Say that again.
Better on the line of scrimmage.
Are they?
Are they?
I don't know. Oklahoma's defensive front, I think so. Yes. Yes, I was going to. I was going to boil it down even more than what you were saying, and I have a lot of belief in Oklahoma's defense. I think they are legit, and I think this is going to be a defensive football game. It's the Oklahoma offense that I think is the one that's on the struggle bus. The defense has been good through 3 weeks, through 3 games, despite getting put in bad situation after bad situation because of the offense. So obviously I think Oklahoma is better than NC State. But I mean, what's different than the teams that Oklahoma has sputtered with and the two teams outside of the Tennessee game that NC State has sputtered with. To me, they're pretty comparable in that regard. And Oklahoma has some issues up front along the offensive line. They also have a young quarterback, obviously with Jackson Arnold. They do have some playmakers that Tennessee will have to be very aware of. But Patrick, I mean, I know this sounds crazy, but again, kind of going to Wes's point of if you take Oklahoma off the jersey and the logo off the helmet, I mean, what's different about Oklahoma's skill position players than NC State's skill position players? And who knows, maybe when we reconvene on Thursday morning and I've studied up on Oklahoma a little bit better, maybe I'll change my tune a little bit. But on the surface, like I don't see much of a difference there. So I think this is a game that I absolutely agree with you, Wes. I think Tennessee on paper should absolutely win this football game. Doesn't mean that it'll be easy. Doesn't mean that it won't be a challenge. But I have a big belief, a strong belief in this Tennessee defensive front traveling. I think that is the best thing that can travel.
Yeah.
Stopping the run and running the football. And those are the two things that this Tennessee football team does best right now. And that defensive front will go up against an Oklahoma offensive front and an inexperienced quarterback who has been very up and down the first couple of games of the season. So that's why I have belief in Tennessee winning this football game. We'll dive into it more, obviously, later in the week. But I do agree with your baseline premise of, on paper, this is a game that Tennessee should go win, especially, Patrick, to your earlier point, if it wants to take the next step as a program and vault itself into that Tier 1 conversation and true national championship conversation.
Yeah, Ben, I would tend to agree with you, and I think I made this point on our no huddle after the Kent State game the other night. But Tennessee's got to go; they've got to go play the opponent, not the environment. They get caught up in the environment, get off their game, start making a bunch of mistakes like we've seen them do on the road. They'll get beat. Oklahoma may have some issues, but they have enough talent and good enough coaches and good enough players to, if Tennessee plays a C+ game, Oklahoma will have a good chance of winning this game. That said, I would agree with you that, you know, that defensive line looks like a overwhelming matchup in favor of Tennessee in this game. And it could be really hard for Oklahoma to move the football. That said, I would take Jackson Arnold over Grayson McCall 10 times out of 10. But he also, you know, he made a lot of plays running in that Tulane game. And that could be a great equalizer. And if he, you know, he's obviously got some arm talent too, threw for like 360 yards in the bowl game. So, you know, if you let him get hot early and get him, you know, let him get in a rhythm, let the crowd, you know, get behind him, he's capable enough. I mean, this guy was a top 10 player. He was number 4, I think 24/7. I think we had him as the number 4 quarterback in that class with Arch and Nico. And I think maybe Dante Moore was the other one.
Yeah. I think some people thought he was a better prospect than Nico. Not many, but some did.
Oh, I mean, if you let him get going early and get some confidence, and, you know, he's probably got the talent to put that team on his back a little bit, kind of like we think Nico can do for Tennessee. So you got to shut the hot, you know, keep the quarterback down, get to him a little bit early, get him rattled, and, you know, he might serve a couple up to you. But I do think Oklahoma's better than NC State. Now they might end up being like 8-4, 7-5 kind of teams. We'll see. There's a lot of football left, but yeah, I think Tennessee is a better team, but there's, you know, Georgia saw it this past week, Kentucky. It's hard to go win on the road at night in this league, and Oklahoma's a newcomer, but, you know, they've got a lot of talent, and that defense is certainly capable, as Heupel alluded to on Monday, of changing games, and with the way they can create negative plays and get turnovers that can obviously swing a game their way, and that's what Tennessee has to be cognizant of as it works in practice this week, Wes.
Yeah, I think for me, this is the last thing before we get out of here. I think we've got to try to get this out for the afternoon commute here for people. But I think we'll definitely talk about this more in the week. I know I will, because for me, it's one of the single biggest stories of the week. As everyone knows, Heupel's homecoming, Oklahoma's first, you know, SEC game, college game days there, a lot going on, both programs with a lot to prove. Those are all the main storylines. For me, there's, in terms of just the pure X's and O's in the game, other than, like, you know, is Nico ready for the moment? Is Arnold ready for the moment? To me, one of the biggest plots of the whole thing is, excuse me, how does Oklahoma go after Tennessee's offense? How much faith does Venables have in his defense to hold up against Tennessee and take away those big plays? Because if they just go too high, like a lot of people do, then that used to be the way to get this team, make them kind of dink and dunk. And, but now they're like, okay, we'll just go too tights and run over you. They don't like, now they've adjusted their game. So for me, what's wrong with my voice today? The question becomes, that's not Venables' MO. Venables is an attack minded guy, right? He likes to go after you. And when you go after this Tennessee offense, big plays happen.
Big plays do happen. Hopefully Tennessee's offense has more success than you do trying to clear your throat here.
I don't know what's happening.
It's a sticky situation with your throat there.
Yeah, but all I'm saying is, if I can get my voice right now, that's not Venables' MO. That's not what he normally likes to do. He likes to go after you. He's been known for that for years. So, but if he does that, does he have faith that his guys can hang one-on-one with the McCoys and the Brazzles and the Whites and the Matthews and, Thorntons and all those guys and all the tight ends? I mean, you just don't play man much against this group because they'll hurt you.
Well, I think that they will hurt you. I don't know that we've seen enough to know that they will create a ton of separation. I like Tennessee's receivers a ton, but they to me are still in the phase of needing to prove that they will consistently create separation and get open. If I am an opposing coach, especially in this situation, if I am Brent Venables, I don't know who the defensive coordinator is for Arkansas, but if I'm Sam Pittman and Arkansas's defensive coordinator, I am attacking Nico. He's still a young guy. He's still learning on the job in a very talented way, but he is still learning on the fly. And especially this weekend in Norman, no offense to the Hogs, we'll see what that environment is like. They have what, Patrick, another tough game or two before Tennessee gets in there?
They got to go. They play Auburn and A&M, so their season could be heading in the right direction or careening towards the coaching search.
Yeah, it to me, do y'all feel the same way?
And that team has been inconsistent as hell.
Yes.
And I'm kind of hesitant on going all in on that offense right now. I don't think Oklahoma State's defense is very good. I think it maybe made Arkansas's offense look better.
Not normally what Oklahoma State is known for.
No, not at all.
They also did know that Arkansas's quarterback apparently can run because they never spied him at all, which was, he was just running into acres of space.
Right, and I don't know how you didn't watch Arkansas's first game, even against Arkansas Pine Bluff, and not realize that he was going to be able to run the football. But wouldn't you agree that Arkansas, Walmart, Tyson Chicken Nugget Stadium is in that same underrated tier, like with Williams-Brice?
Tennessee always struggles there, it seems like.
Well, that's not my question, though. Don't you like Williams-Brice is viewed as one of the most underrated atmospheres in college football because it's South Carolina football. Like, to me, Arkansas and its stadium, the venue, like, it's an underrated venue like Williams-Brice is.
It's tough,
right? Would y'all agree with that?
Yeah, they have a great atmosphere at Bud Walton, which I've not been there. I've been to 2 Tennessee-Arkansas football games. One was 2011. It was a night game. Arkansas was good. That was when Petrino, before the motorcycle shenanigans.
Yeah.
I remember it being, a standard SEC road environment. And then the last one I went to was 2020. They made a lot of noise in a quarter to a third full stadium, given that was Sam Pittman's first year, and they had been subjected to Chad Morris, and the fact that they were winning games they were pretty excited, but it was still a limited attendance stadium.
Right. The overall point that I'm getting to in a very distracted manner, I apologize for the tangent, but like in these 2 games, Oklahoma will certainly be a tougher environment than Arkansas, but even Arkansas could potentially be a tough environment depending on how their next couple of games go, as Patrick pointed out. If I am those defensive coaches, I am attacking Nico because he is still learning on the job. I am still pressing Tennessee. I am attacking Nico. I'm blitzing. I'm being very, very aggressive, trying to force Nico into turnovers. And I think that's the one area that we're still learning about this offense and learning about Nico as a young quarterback. Can he hold up when the other team is just dialing up pressure after pressure after pressure? Can he handle that? And can Tennessee's offensive front handle that? I think that Tennessee's offensive line can handle that, but Has Lance Hurd truly taken that next step in his young college football career? Has John Campbell taken the next step in his career to where he is going to be more consistent? Has Andre Carrick over at left guard, has he taken the next step in his career? There's still some questions up front along the offensive line, even if we think it's a solid to really good offensive line. So I'm pressuring them, A, to see if Tennessee's personnel can handle it, and B, to see if a young quarterback can handle it. Because at the end of the day, this offense has a lot of versatility. As you talked about, Wes, and Patrick and I talked about it on our No Huddle, outside of the Oklahoma game and the Oklahoma matchup. To me, one of the big storylines on Monday when meeting with the media, talking to Miles Kitselman, talking to Josh Heupel, was Tennessee's ability to be able to go in the 12 personnel, to be able to go light, to go to a 4 wide receiver set. They can really do, I think, pretty much whatever personnel package they want to do, because they have enough players and enough depth and enough versatility within its personnel to do different things. And as Miles Kitselman said, I mean, that's a nightmare for opposing defenses when you have to prepare for everything, for a lot of different looks. So if it's the NC State game 2.0 and they're dropping 8 and it's light in the box, like, Tennessee's going to go 12 personnel and they're going to try and run it down Oklahoma's throat. And if they've got the numbers advantage, they will run it down Oklahoma's throat. And if Oklahoma tries to load the box, we'll see what the game plan with the passing game is in that situation, Patrick, because I don't know if Oklahoma's loading the box and they're bringing pressure. Joey Halsley, I would hope and think that he's not going to sit there and call pass plays to where Nico's going to have a 5-step drop and sitting back there in the pocket. Like, he's going to need to get the ball quick out of his hands. So they're going to run those screens that are an extension of the running game to where they're getting it out to the perimeter if they have the numbers advantage. And they're, from a personnel standpoint, they're set to thrive there as well. So I am fascinated, Wes, to your question, Mark, about how Venables and defenses going forward attack this Tennessee offense, because it seems like they have personnel. They can go to a personnel that will answer how opposing defenses attack them. To me right now, the answer is just trying to be aggressive and trying to attack Nico as a young quarterback and hope you can force him into some mistakes.
Yeah, Ben, I think you're going to see – I haven't looked up the blitz rates from the first 3 games, but Oklahoma's a new defensive coordinator this year. Zach Alley, he's a younger guy. I think he came over from Jacksonville State, and he worked for Venables at Clemson for, I think, several years. So you would think it's going to be maybe more of that same Clemson Venables DNA. And I think they were always known for being really exotic, really aggressive. So I think you could see that in this game, but that's the way, as you touched on, Ben, that Tennessee pressures you, is that they've got a lot of different counters. You know, they can pull tackles, pull guards, they'll pull Cooper Mays, they'll go 12 personnel, they'll use the tight ends, they'll throw to the tight ends. You know, when they're running the ball, they've used play action really well this season so far. So before we get out of here, though, I do want to. We haven't really touched on Heupel going back. What would the Tennessee equivalent be? Would it be like T. Martin?
It'd be T.
Martin going somewhere, because like
coach, yeah.
It's not quite like Peyton, because I mean Oklahoma's had a long 25 years of pretty awesome quarterbacks that have won them a lot of football games.
It would be slightly more than T. Martin, maybe, because he won. You know, Heupel almost won a Heisman, and if T. Martin had won the national championship and almost won a Heisman, maybe that would be the
well. T won the title for Tennessee, and Heupel won the title for Oklahoma.
Correct.
Now, what was the score of that game, Ben, that you discovered earlier on Monday?
Yes, I discovered today on Monday that the score of that game was 13-2. Gross.
But
so maybe Heupel's defensive teammates that did a lot of the heavy lifting in that game. He would probably admit that, but not very happily.
But I mean, they've had Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray win the Heisman. Jason White won the Heisman when Heupel was there. Sam Bradford. I mean, they've had other guys. You know, I wonder if they, and I don't know this, I wonder, do they hold him in different esteem because he won the national title? Like, that would be my question. So would that be? I mean, I guess it would be like T going somewhere like Oklahoma. It's not a team. It's not like a rival necessarily. You maybe have some familiarity with them. I mean, I know Tennessee and Oklahoma played a couple years ago, and then, you know, Oklahoma took like 3 guys that were a part of that Tennessee exodus when Jeremy Pruitt was fired. And, you know, so it wouldn't be like, you know, he's not going to a conference rival. That would pretty much what it would be like. And then he goes there and starts just winning. I mean, Heupel's 30-12, I think, 3 games into his 4th season. So, you know, I'm sure there would be some conflicting emotions there from fans, but Heupel had a good line on Monday too, saying that he thought Oklahoma that they would be quiet for him out of respect for what he did.
Yeah,
that was a good line. He seemed
just
really
show some
relaxed.
respect, let his offense at least get the play call in.
Right.
Make sure he can hear it in the helmet. It's all good.
Right. So I was wondering about that. We didn't really touch on the return as much, but certainly it's a storyline for this game.
Here's my last question, going off Patrick's, Wes, is how do you think Josh channels those emotions? I think he'll handle it well. Like, I don't think he's going to make a bad decision because he's caught up in the moment. I don't think he's going to get caught up in the moment at all. I really don't.
He tries to be robotic.
My question is, how do you think he does from an X's and O's game plan, scheming something up standpoint? Do you think that his ability to scheme things up, do you think that leads to a sneaky play? Like, do you think he tries to get too aggressive with his play calling and it hurts Tennessee? Or do you think he really gets deep in his bag because he wants to prove a point and that helps Tennessee? Does the aggressiveness, trying to stick it to them with his X's and O's, do you think that will help or hurt?
Well, it's interesting because it not just goes for him, it also goes for Halsley, right? Who has a lot of input on the offense. He also played at Oklahoma. So yeah, I mean, there's it's interesting because I think Heupel tries his best to not be a robot in terms of like his emotions during a game, but like in his preparation, treating everything the same. Every day feels like the same in the complex. He will try. I think it was what Kitzelman said. Heupel hasn't mentioned a word to the team about it yet. And he probably won't. I would think that he won't do it. I think he'll just be like, "Nah, guys, we're gonna go play football."
I don't know why you would. Like, what does it matter to his players?
Yeah,
I mean, how old were a lot of his players? Probably weren't even born when he was playing.
Right, and like if I'm a player, like I don't care. Like it doesn't.
Well, I mean, you want to have your coaches back, right? I mean, you want to rally around something. I mean, football teams have to have their platitudes and their rallying cries, and with Tennessee, it's Tennessee versus Tennessee every week. I mean, that's their thing. But like, I mean, whatever, Lane's was all in. Everybody's got a thing, right? Dooley's was probably something Shakespeare said. I don't know, but like it's. I think if anything, he'll err on the side of being too aggressive. He would do that rather than not, because let's not forget, when he was there, the last time he was in Norman, he was dismissed as the offensive coordinator by the head coach who he won a national championship for, despite Heupel not really being able to run his system when he was there because, the coach was a little bit more old school in some ways and a defensive guy and didn't want to do that. So, Heupel in his mind is like, I'm going to show you what you're missing. Like, you loved me as a player, but you got rid of me as a coach and it wasn't my fault. I
don't think he'll let that, the so-called grudge, whatever you want to call it. I don't think he'll. Say
Toby Keith, how do you like me now?
The only way I think that comes into play is if Tennessee is just kicking Oklahoma around and he's got a chance to maybe rub in an extra, put an extra score on the board. You know what I mean?
That's what I'm saying.
Rub it in there, rub their noses in it a little bit more. Like,
I think that's the only Toby Keith song I know is "How Do You Like Me Now." So maybe it's that one that he plays.
That would be the only way. I actually think Heupel has changed maybe from his first two seasons where it was he coached games knowing like I've got to score basically every time I've got the ball, to now he has a defense now where he can trust it a little bit more, and maybe doesn't have to do that. We've seen him coach games, manage games a little differently starting last season. But, again, I think he's maybe a little bit more measured in that. But make no mistake, I mean, he was kind of lighthearted and joking a little bit on Monday. This guy's a competitor, and he very badly wants to win this football game.
I agree. And we'll see as this week progresses. I mean, we'll get hopefully some of our friends from Oklahoma's 24/7 site here on the podcast. We'll try to get them with some Q&A stuff on going. Need Ryan to give us some information.
No, we don't.
To go with, because he knows those guys through recruiting stuff.
We don't need Ryan,
but relying on Ryan is problematic. Maybe would be the right way.
Like you try to clear your throat.
Basically, yeah. It's when I tried to clear my throat 10 minutes ago, try that for 13 years. Like that's basically what it's been. So yeah.
My 3-year-old that made a cameo on this video is more reliable than Ryan. That was Wyatt, by the way. Shout out Wyatt.
Yeah, that's right. And if it had been Ryan, he would have come 5 minutes later than that. That's how that would have been probably. So he made it on time, at least your boy did. So yeah, we got a lot to discuss this week, and we'll discuss all of it But we'll leave this conversation here now so we can get this to you hopefully before you get home with your commute. So if you're hearing this on the audio format through your podcast app, you're going to hear the outro. But if you're watching this on YouTube, you will not. So for those of you watching on YouTube or Facebook, hopefully, thanks for being here, fellas.
Thanks, Wes.
Thanks, Wes.